he's known. My name is Daisy Amdany, and I am the Executive Director of Community Advocacy and Awareness Trust, that's Crown Trust, and coordinator of the National Women's Steering Committee, which is a platform that brings together women around women's political and economic emancipation. We are members of Angaza and Okoa Uchumi. As you've heard, Your Excellency, in this room, we have members of the Angaza movement, which is a movement of civil society organizations working around electoral integrity and accountability. I'm sure you've seen several press releases and press conferences being raised around the issues of IEBC's preparedness and the integrity of the electoral process, which is of great concern, and that will be spoken to by the Angaza representative. We also have the Okoa Uchumi coalition that is convened by TISA that works around debt accountability. Of course, we know that that's one of the biggest concerns that we have as a nation, the debt burden and the performance of our economy. And so we hope that you'll be able to speak to these issues. There will be presentations from the different groups. Personally, I would like to speak as part of the opening to the issues of women. And you know, as you're a women's champion, you know I am also a women's champion. And so I want to congratulate you, first of all, on the launch of the Charter and your signing of the Women's Charter as a commitment to the women's agenda. Should you make government, should you become president. And I think that it's noble. You have committed to implementing the 2/3 gender principle within 90 days. One question I will ask, though, is why should we believe you this time around? We remember that Jubilee in 2013 made a very strong commitment and even said women were tired of empty promises and promised to implement the 2/3 gender principle within 100 days, and there was a formula. So this time around, we would like to know how you are going to do it. The challenges may be the same. Also, what formula you plan on using. We have worked around this issue since 2011, and we are willing to work with your team to actually develop a formula so that when you get in, it is not an issue of, oh, let's look for a formula, then we spend the next 5 years looking for a formula. We agree on a formula so that when your team gets in, the first thing you do is implement that formula, and that is one thing that we would want to see. And we are committing ourselves to be available for that. The Charter speaks of women's economic empowerment, which is very important because given the performance of the economy, we know that there has to be an economic recovery strategy. And we would want to see women central to this. However, the Charter speaks broadly and very minimally about the care economy and the issues around unpaid care work, which is something that really holds women back. And so we would want to see stronger commitment on the issues of unpaid care, specifically, first, getting the government to recognize unpaid care work and quantify it so that it can be visible, so that you can see, the country can see what women contribute in terms of unpaid care work, because unpaid care is the basis for paid care, paid work, and it has been ignored. So we would want to see that being done, and it can be quantified using time-use surveys. And this is something that the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics can do, so that the contribution becomes visible and it can be remunerated and redistributed, but it will also help in planning. We appreciate your commitment on pads for all girls. However, it's not necessarily all girls who need pads. We know that it's a major issue and has caused several problems. We would want to see gender-responsive budgeting, because what that would do would give you the necessary data, the disaggregated data, and we have people like Hillary and quite a few people in this room that are advocates for gender-responsive budgeting, so that you would be able to see and know exactly what the needs are for women and girls men as well, lest the men begin, boy child always cries when we talk about men, but gender-responsive budgeting would help you to collect disaggregated data to know and inform your policy initiatives so that you are more effective in your planning and targeted responses such as PADS. On a separate issue, away from the women, Parliament recently passed a very controversial bill on the ICT, requiring that anyone who employs any kind of technology, processing, storing, transfer information, must have a degree, a university degree. Now, we know that, and not only university degree, but also 3 years relevant experience. Now, we believe that this will disadvantage many because we have very many young people working in ICT and they have great innovation. Many of them don't have degrees or even that 3-year experience, but they do have that innovation. And we even have one of them, Moses Gitonga is one of them. He's an ICT whiz, yet he has never even stepped into a computer class. There are people who have innate talent. We also have representatives from women in extractives, which is an area, and Dr. Wasuna is there, an area that I think maybe before you make any responses, she should be able to speak about the many, many challenges that women face in extractives. And of course, we're talking about oil, gas, gemstones. There is also the issue of children with special gifting. Kenya does not have, the education system in Kenya does not have a support base to support families that have genius children. And so what happens is that they are mainstreamed into our regular education system and not able to exploit that talent. And it is an emerging challenge. And so we would like to know how your government would respond to this. So with those few remarks from me, allow me to invite Abraham Rugo from the Okoa Uchumi to make his presentation. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Dr. William Ruto, it's a pleasure for me to be able to join this fraternity of Kenyans across board, particularly in this time when we are going to be headed to a transition. And I think the issues that have been raised just before me by Daisy are really pertinent. But colleagues, if you would allow me, and allow me to just call you colleagues because we are all fellow Kenyans trying to build our country, I'm going to speak to matters that perhaps may disturb us a bit. Because as I have listened to all campaigns going round, from MCAs in my village in Rongai to Your Excellency presidential candidates, we are all promising things, but it will all fall down to public money. I'm going to speak about public debt, and I'm going to speak to it because it's a critical matter. Why is this a serious matter now? Now, it's important for us to appreciate that we will never have a situation, at least not in the medium term, where we have all the money we need for all the needs we have as a country. And therefore, we are going to borrow. But what we are observing is that the budget deficit is growing at a very fast rate. What is the budget deficit? This is the difference between our income and our spending, and I'll speak to it a bit more. But interestingly, whereas in the past this has been driven by infrastructure, building of roads, building of the railway lines, building of different infrastructure, it is actually going to start being recurrent driven. In other words, it is going to be driven by payment of salaries, and running of government. Two, the money that we charge to public debt, in other words, the amounts that we pay for public debt, are charged as a fast charge. Just like when you fuliza, Safaricom does not consult you when you receive an M-Pesa transaction, whether they should deduct their money. They take it first. And that is increasingly higher, and it's taking more money from our coffers, and I will say a bit more. And if we surpass it, it means then we basically have money, but we don't have money. You know, those times when you say, I have a salary, but I don't have a salary. And that's. But more importantly, is that as the money decreases, the critical services to health, to education, to water, to agriculture, where majority of Kenyans depend on government because they cannot afford private care and private provision, are the ones that will suffer because then they get edged out. Allow me to take you through a couple of, allow me to start here. Now that's how our growth is happening in terms of our spending on public debt. What it means is that in 2021, 2022, we are spending 66 shillings out of every 100 shillings we collect in paying public debt. What does that mean? It means that if you have 100 shillings in your pocket, 66 shillings is already being taken away. You are left with just about 34 shillings, which is where you need to get money for paying for healthcare, where you need to get money to pay for agricultural services, where you need to get money for any emergencies like food shortages, like when there's a situation like we've had of COVID and the like. Now, this is a worrying picture, if you ask me. But what is the problem? The problem is that the growing deficit is a governance problem. Now, I talked about growing deficit, but allow me to explain it a bit more. Now, I presented those numbers, but I want you to focus on the last column. Every year, we make a budget as a country. Now, that budget already starts with a deficit. In other words, this is the amount of money we don't have from our revenue. Now, I want you to notice the differences in the years. Now, in the first year, in 2014, 2015, the changes that happened within the year. In other words, what happens is that we aimed, let me bring this down. So you have 100 shillings as your income. Your spending is 150 shillings. And therefore, you have a deficit of 50 shillings. But in the year, you expected to collect 100 to get your income of 100 shillings. You actually got an income of 80 shillings. Now, one would expect that you reduce your spending from 150 to 130. But what has actually happened is that we have had situations where the spending actually increases from 150 to 170. That's exactly what that column shows you. Now, I know there were needs, there were demands, but Your Excellency, why I'm presenting this table is that if this trend continues, what it does is that it will finally crowd out the amount of money you have to spend to run and to achieve the promises that are being made. And why do I say this is a governance problem? Because honestly, as a country, at the beginning of a financial year, and the budget process is a very, very long one, and a lot of discussions goes into it. So it cannot be that we did not anticipate where we will get almost, 400 billion as we were starting the year. And therefore, it's not just a technical problem. It's not just a numbers problem. It's something that requires reining in. It's something that requires, and I hope Kenya Kwanza government can take this matter very seriously. Because as long as you have these kind of shifts, then it means that you don't have a predictable mechanism of how to spend. But allow me to present this picture, which is the budget that your government, should you win, will inherit. This is the budget for 2022-2023. Now, when you inherit this budget, the anticipated collection of revenue is 2.4 trillion Kenya shillings. Out of that, ordinary revenue, and just to clarify, ordinary revenue is VAT, excise duty, import duty, and income tax. That is the tax that all of us are charged. It does not include, for instance, the amounts we pay for permits and all other services, what we call appropriation in aid. But consolidated fund services, remember my first slide of what I talked about, the first charge to the government account, bank account, Already, public debt will take 1.3 trillion. This is the budget that was approved, by the way, so I'm not talking about numbers that are imaginary. This is the budget that starts being implemented in the next 2 weeks, on 1st of July. Pensions will take 171.8 billion. And Your Excellency, you know very well that this is a very small amount because we have a very huge pension that is yet to be processed. The truth of the matter is that because pensioners, once they leave the public service, they go home, they cannot unionize, they cannot come to the streets, they are our fathers, they are our grandfathers and grandmothers, yet their processing takes up to 3 years. Some pension processing takes up to 5 years. From where I sit, I think it's because there's no money. I can be convinced otherwise, but this figure is far much more. And if you remember, because of the employment and the decisions that were made with the structural adjustment programs in the 1990, if you remember the golden handshake, yes, or around that time, majority of the civil servants that were employed when employment was frozen are retiring between 2020 and 2025. And therefore, we expect the pension account to grow bigger. It has tripled in the last 3 years, just to tell you how serious this is. So already, follow with me the math. So already, as you start, you have 1.571. From 2.4, how much are you left with? Just do the math quickly. 900 billion, correct? Are we together? But the actual amount, because the other 300 billion is appropriation, it's spent in the ministries and all that, basically it's 2.1 minus 1.5, which gives you 600 billion. Now, I have not added constitutional offices where your salary and the salary of the retired presidents and other constitutional commissioners comes from. It's about 10 billion, so we can say it's a small amount. Remove county equitable share, which is already approved, of 407. Remove the Teacher Service Commission. This is not CBC. It's not schools, classes, construction, or books. This is just teachers' salaries, the amount of money we transfer to TSC. We just picked the main items. 297, remove national defense, because again, this is non-negotiable. 128, remove salaries under the State Department of Interior, basically the police and other security agencies. 136, your total allocation to those items is 2.541. You're already starting with a deficit. You have not paid salaries in agriculture. You have not paid salaries in healthcare. You have not paid. This is not a grim picture to make us angry. It is a grim picture to make us act. And that's a call I want to make, and that's why I decided to present this picture as it is. In other words, that we need to think very seriously how we shall deal with the 1.393 figure. Now, let me just push it slightly further. A lot of these payments are interest payments to the debts we have taken. We are yet to factor in principal payments. Now, anytime you borrow, and because Kenya has borrowed commercially also, anytime you borrow at the bank or at the SACCO, they are very quick to recover the interest and not the principal. Now, all of you know why? Because the principal determines the interest. The longer the interest is kept, the more the interest you have to pay. So we need to rethink whether it's to increase the terms of these loans, is to renegotiate the interest rate, both domestically and internationally. And domestically is where we have the greatest risk of interest rate fluctuation, because already domestically we are lending at 12%. 12%, 11%. What then do we ask of you? The whole question around transparency and public participation in public debt and all public finances becomes critical. Why transparency? It's because one of the biggest challenge right now is legitimacy of government. Where was this money? And I did not present to you just the numbers of how. We are now at 8.8, 8.9, roughly around there, a trillion in terms of stock. Now, the stock has been pushed up because of the drop in the exchange rate of the dollar. And the dollar changing, by another 10 shillings, our debt just goes up by another 400 billion or thereabout. Transparency is critical because first it's a factor of legitimacy. Where is this money being spent? what kind of projects are being spent? And these are questions that we have asked, and we want to present this to you, saying it will be important for Kenyans to know how this money, because debt is future tax, and all of us will pay it. 2, the role of Parliament comes to question, because Parliament approves all the deficits I have presented. And therefore, this is a call again to Kenya Kwanza and all the team of Parliament to strengthen that oversight role, because we give our mandate as a public trust to Parliament, and we expect that Parliament safeguards that public trust. We all cannot legislate for ourselves. And therefore, that will be critical, that the oversight role of Parliament in ensuring that we don't sink further. And colleagues, if you think sinking further is impossible, just take a tour of countries like Greece, of Portugal, of Sri Lanka, which is the latest case. But more importantly, let us bring it back home. Think about the skyrocketing cost of living. Or it does not affect you in this room? It does affect me. The reason why it affects us is because if government does not have wiggle space, it has to raise taxes or borrow more. There are only those 2 options. I think it's good for us to be honest with each other. It has to either raise taxes or raise borrowing. And therefore, the oversight role becomes not only a matter of good practice of legislature, it also becomes now a matter of survival. And if I will say redemption of our country. Number 3, the whole question around leadership and integrity in financial management is critical. As I said, this is a governance problem from where we sit. We must deal firmly with misuse and abuse of public resources, especially debt proceeds. Anybody who has taken time to read the Auditor General's report the last 2 weeks, it's worrying, it's disturbing that some of the money cannot be traced where it went. Some of the projects, never happened, and we are owed, and we have defaulted. I think this is a critical, and we are calling upon you as a Okoa Uchumi campaign. Really, we have to save our economy, because our existence, our collective existence, depends on it. And finally, is a question of tax justice. We are aware, and we perhaps do not like to say this so much, but it's important for us to put it, that not all Kenyans pay their fair share of tax. Only about 3 million out of about 20 million working Kenyans of one form make tax returns. In other words, pay income tax. What has happened in the last 3 quarters of basically the last 2 years, and especially this year, is that KRA has deepened, pushed those who are already registered to pay more. And that's why they're achieving their targets. You're aware that KRA is already achieving its target. It's achieved it. They had a bonus last year. They achieved their targets. But tax justice means that all of us, first of all, pay our fair share of tax, but also not only a fair share of tax, but we also get a fair share of the public services. Because it makes no sense for me to pay taxes, but still have to provide private education for my children. Still have to pay medical bills, and a lot of families and households today are between a medical bill and extreme poverty, even in this room. And when we have tax justice, it simply means that everybody is paying what they ought to pay, but they are getting a fair return of what they need to get. And with that, I want to say, we are more than happy to share more ideas on what we can do about these matters, because this is our country, and I stop there. Thank you very much. And now, it's my pleasure to invite Joanna Koth, who will say more about the challenges faced by women in the AJAABU program. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Now I'll pick up on the issue concerning the need for us to continue championing for women, for the women agenda in order to have gender balance across all the sectors we are working in. And I'm glad that in this room we have so many gender champions, including His Excellency. So that fits in very well with what I'm about to speak to. So as I mentioned, my name is Akoth Joan from the Institute for Social Accountability, and I'm here to present a case towards gender balance in the public procurement processes. So allow me speak a bit around the access to government procurement processes and how it remains very largely untapped area, despite the fact that it could provide opportunities for women to actually engage with government and do business in government, and also start engaging in very high value businesses, as well as engaging in the non-traditional business sectors, which could in turn give more value in terms of returns for women businesses. Now, in Kenya, we know that the procurement processes are very highly regulated, and by virtue of the high regulation in the procurement processes, we know that sometimes this leads to very complex procedures which are very time consuming and by virtue of the high regularization of the sector, this could sometimes lead to very time-consuming and costly tendering procedures by virtue of the complexity in the bidding procedures and the filling in of the tender documents. So this ends up not being very favorable, especially to the women-led businesses, and end up making the process even more costly. And considering that women are already coming in at a disadvantage by virtue of the fact that not very many women-led businesses are able to afford these very costly procedures. As far as regulation and policy frameworks being put in place, we know that in Kenya we have very robust regulations and policy frameworks to guide AGPO implementation. We have a robust constitution and the PFM framework, which guides the implementation of AGPO. As far as the institutional framework being put in place, we have the Public Procurement Regulation Authority and the AGPO Secretariat, which support the implementation of AGPO. But despite all these frameworks being put in place, we know that women are not coming out to take up these AGPO opportunities provided for by virtue of the complexity in the regulation procedures. So evidence and by virtue of our interaction with the women-led businesses, we've been able to identify some of the challenges that we think are contributing to the lack of uptake for the women-led businesses in these AGPO procedures. And allow me just share with us some of the challenges we've identified as hindering uptake of the AGPO opportunities by women-led businesses. Through the interactions and evidence, the first challenge we've identified as hindering uptake of the AGPO opportunities by women-led businesses is the issue of pending bills. And this is an issue that has been spoken to year in, year out. So what the pending bills have been doing to the businesses is that, yes, the opportunities are there. Some of them are able to actually secure the tenders after going through the procedures. But what happens is that after you secure the tenders, after you supply the goods and services, then you're not able to receive what you are owed by government. So this ends up driving very quickly especially the women-led businesses which are not able to sustain themselves. So it ends up driving them out of market very quickly. So that is a major challenge that needs to be addressed. And we know that I think almost every year directives are given for the issues of pending bills to be prioritized. But it is one thing to give a directive and another to follow through, where we hear during presses directives being given for pending bills to be prioritized, pending bills to be paid, but that is not followed through. So the challenge keeps on being experienced year in, year out, and it ends up, the opportunity is given on one hand, but then on the other hand, that opportunity leads to your business being closed because you're not able to sustain yourself. You went into your pocket, you went ahead to even borrow in order for you to be able to supply these goods and services. But when you're not paid on time, that causes maybe one of the effects is the closure of the businesses. And through our various interactions recently, we've seen that this is even leading to mental health issues, where you have borrowed in so many places, hoping that the government will be able to pay you soon enough for you to be able to service your debts. But that doesn't happen. So what do? You keep on borrowing. And after a while, your story ceases to be sustainable. So some people are ending up going into depression just by virtue of this issue of pending bills. So it's an issue of concern that we think needs to be addressed. The other challenge that we see is the issue of the weak LPO order framework, where once you're given the tender, an LPO is issued and it's supposed to act as your security to go and ask or rather seek financing in order for you to supply the goods and services. So what has happened is that over the years, many financial institutions do not consider an LPO as a credible security. It's supposed to act as a security. But by virtue of the history and the engagement with government, they are no longer considering LPOs just because of the bad engagement. So so that is one of the challenges that is affecting the women-led businesses in operation for AJAABU. Then the other concern is the low knowledge on tender application processes, which has increased the cost of business for women-led businesses. So we know that some of these procedures can very easily be done, maybe through the phones, but of course you need to have the knowledge and ability to actually fill the tender documents and follow due with the other processes. But many of these are small women-led businesses. Majority of them do not even have access to the smartphones that they could easily use to fill in these tender documents, and do not have the knowledge to go about the complex tendering procedures. So that means they have to go and get someone else to come and assist them in filling in these procedures and following due process in the tendering process. That means an extra cost. In an event that they don't have a smartphone, they either have to go to a cyber cafe just so that they can be able to complete these procedures. So that makes the cost of filling in or following due process in the tendering process more costly for women-led businesses. Then there's the automation of the procurement process, which remains currently a mirage. We know that there's the e-procurement system, but it's not end-to-end encrypted by virtue of the fact that, yes, there are online documents which are supposed to be filled, but at the end of the day, you're asked to go print them out and hand them over physically. So that is one of the challenges, because there's an e-procurement process, but it's not end-to-end encrypted. Then we have the high demands and compliance requirements for high-value tenders. So given the challenges we identified, I have a slide on what we as civil society would like to see the government do, or the Kenya Kwanza government do, should you win the election and go into office. So this is what we would like to see get done to address the challenges. So on the issue of pending bills, it is indicated that 70% of the pending bills is because of poor documentation during the tendering process. So for this, we propose to have a robust periodic capacity enhancement framework for women-led businesses in order to empower them and give them the ability to be able to undertake the tendering process smoothly. Then we also propose for ring-fencing of the AJAABU procurement in the budget, because at the moment what happens is that there's not a clear budget for AJAABU. So what happens is that sometimes other priorities take up and there's a reallocation that happens, which ends up eating into the AJAABU budget and therefore not giving the women what is deserving to them. There's also the issue of the need to have sustained provisions for credit guarantee to cushion women accessing financing. Currently, that doesn't exist. Then need to have full operationalization of the AJAABU e-procurement system. So then, yes, they need to have full operationalization of the AJAABU e-procurement system. Currently, what we have is the IFMI system, which is an accounting system, so they need to have an e-procurement system. Then need to set up a reward or punishment for government entities to enable comply with the 30%, where we are able to identify and call out those who are not actually implementing the 30% provision for AJAABU. Then they need to employ more women procurement officers. We know that the procurement profession is very male-dominated. So some of the challenges experienced by women, we have some women are experiencing sexualization of the AJAABU procurement processes. So getting more women employed in the procurement process will actually help us cure some of these processes. So I'll ask that the Kenya Kwanza team considers our proposal towards addressing the procurement challenges being faced by women in order to enable them access more of these AJAABU opportunities. And leave it there. All right, due to public demand, I've been told to emphasize need because of time. I think I rushed through. So this is one of the main challenges that is being experienced by women during the procurement process. We've been told that it is marred by very many inefficiencies, hindering women from effectively participating in tenders. So one of the issues is the request for payment of kickbacks or parting with a portion of the payment amount. Then we have sexualization, then lastly politicization of tenders where only elite women, wives, girlfriends or relatives of politicians are main beneficiaries of the AJAABU tenders. So I'll leave it on that note and invite my colleague Winnie from Angaza to make the next presentation. Thank you.
No, I'm not presenting. Yeah. So, Your Excellency, the Deputy President of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, Governors present today, Governor Nanok and Governor Mandago, who is also my governor in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County, women reps present today, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So my name is Winnie Masai, and I'll be talking about transformative leadership. I'm standing before you on behalf of Angaza movement. My presentation will be centered on the concept of transformative leadership. I'll just briefly unpackage what it is, and then probably run through the challenges that women are facing as regards to moving towards transformative leadership, and finally end with our asks, what we will need from you or from Kenya Kwanza should they make it to the next government. So transformative leadership is something that Kenyans have really aspired, but it has really remained elusive. And it has remained elusive because of different reasons, which I'm going to run through. But just to unpackage the concept of transformative leadership, it is that transformative leadership is that which causes change, or it inspires change
individual and social change in systems. It is premised on the culture of accountability, ownership. It is a participatory process that encourages, inspires, motivates citizens to innovate, co-create, and create change that will help grow and shape our country. But on the very least, however, the basic premise of transformative leadership actually is the fact that any person can lead, and so women too can lead. In 2010, we enacted the new constitution, and with that, it inspired or it heralded the beginning of that aspiration for transformative leadership. It provided a framework for inclusion and equality. However, that has not been realized in this country because one of the biggest challenges is implementation of the constitution and the lack of political goodwill. Despite having this progressive constitution, very little has been realized and a lot needs to be done. We need to appreciate that Kenya is a multi-party state, and because of this, it has opened up and embraced opportunities that have allowed various stakeholders to champion for their various interests. Given that we're in an election season, Kenya is looking to decide who's going to lead them. And as we move towards the election on August 9th, it's important that we address the electoral challenges that have continued to affect our country. The idea of democracy is a good thing because it allows us to express to have different political expressions which make our country better. So because of this, we need to protect and expand the democracy that we have as a country. And importantly also, we need to allow the space for the different actors to operate and participate. Given that we're in a campaign season, the various parties, the various coalitions are coming up with different manifestos. It is important that, so these manifestos first are very brilliant. They are well articulated and they've been developed by the best mind. However, we've seen that with each successive elections, these manifestos have failed also to address the issues of the mwananchi. And also beyond just presenting the manifesto itself, some of it don't get implemented to the, as it was well articulated. Because now they are not implemented well, it has resulted in an economic crisis. It has also resulted in the huge debt that we continue to experience as a country. It has also increased cases of corruption, because some of these programs are designed and when they are not rolled out as they should, then it opens an avenue for corruption because they are budgeted for, but they are not implemented as they should. So when we talk about, so we cannot talk about transformative leadership without talking about the role of women in this country. I think as it's been mentioned earlier, women form a significant part of this population. They occupy various spaces, and of course, they also contribute significantly to the economy. They are also a very important constituent of the politicians, and they are often targeted during the campaign period. And because of this, we need a framework that will articulate the issues that women need. One of the biggest challenges that we've had, especially as regards to women issues and elections, is that there's a lack of inclusion of women in governance and political process. We need women to sit at the table where decisions are being made so that we ensure that the programs that are being designed and the programs that are being implemented respond effectively to the needs of women in the communities. So the absence of women in these tables means that, so the women's nuances are not, articulated in policy development and decision making. There are so many layers that contribute to exclusion of women. Like, for example, if we are developing programs for women, the needs for a woman in an urban center is different from that in a rural center. The needs for a woman in a slum area is also very different from a woman in a minority community or in a marginalized place. So all these things, all these dynamics need to be factored in. The other issue is the skewed approach to the two-third gender rule. There is an assumption that when we talk of two-third gender rule, the focus is on political it is just on political appointments. This needs to transcend beyond just the political appointments and also focus on the appointments at all levels, whether it's parastatal, whether it's the other sectors. We need to see women represented. So what are the enablers enablers that contribute to exclusion of women? So one of the things when you talk about election is the prevalence of sexual and gender-based violence during election. In the previous election in 2017, we had a significant number of women affected, and even in 2007, and most of these issues have not been retributed or addressed. So we want to go into this election with a focus on women, and we want to urge the various contenders that are involved to make sure that they provide a safe environment for women. The other issue is poverty level. It's quite high in Kenya. 42% of the population are already living below that poverty line. And communities are really struggling to provide that 1 meal per day. So in this event, women also are affected disproportionately by poverty. I will not talk about corruption much because I think my colleagues have mentioned that. We are losing a third of our GDP to corruption, and that is affecting issues of tenders, access to tenders and business opportunities. So I think that has also been spoken about. So what is our idea of transformative leadership from a Ngaza point of view? I think for us it's a leadership that acknowledges and includes women in representation and decision making. It's a leadership that acknowledges that also Kenya is made up of different tribes. Thus, inclusion should be also the face of various tribes, not just women, but also the tribes that are around that are in this country. It should also encompass the concept of the two-third gender rule, as enshrined in the Constitution. We need to see a leadership that views and places women strategically in key spaces in both national and county government and other spaces as well. We also want to see that a leadership that also begins to help the women to break down the issue of patriarchy, which is a problem. And this should be addressed not only in political parties, also in the parliament. The reason why we don't have two-third gender rules is because I think also women are lacking in government, so we can't push for our agenda. So please help us break that because it is a big problem. The other notion of transformative leadership is, we need to root integrity in the community. The concept of inspiring collective action, inspiring collective change should be rooted in the concept of integrity. So what is our ask as I conclude the conversation? I think we need to see deliberate nomination of women to key institutions of leadership. We want to see women making very tough decisions. We want to see women in ministries like, finance. We want to see them seated there. It's not enough that we have, a chief justice who is a woman. We want to see women making these key decisions. Please rally your followers to provide a safe space for women political contestants to participate in these elections. It's not been easy for them, especially during the party primaries, but we hope that even as we move towards the election, that this is an issue that will be addressed. And then we need to recognize that SGBV has been used as a weapon as a political weapon or a tool that has been used to dehumanize women during elections. So we need to say no to that and say that we need to treat our women and girls better. Then we also need to operationalize the two-third gender rule because for us that provides the framework for engagement. And the other thing that is very, very important as well is to ensure that we will have peaceful elections whose outcome would be credible, that would be legitimate, and also will be acceptable. So we also need to appreciate that electoral integrity should not focus only on institutions. I think when we talk of electoral integrity, we tend to focus a lot on the IBC. We also need to focus on the caliber of leadership and the quality of leadership that we are bringing forth to this society. Then we also need to nominate women and men of integrity. You have a significant number of followers as Kenya Kwanza, most of them the youth. So please mentor and inspire that leadership because that's the only way we'll begin to transform the leadership of this country. So finally, I think as I end, we'll just say that this is the beginning of the conversation. We hope that we can have another conversation again where we put in place concrete measures to discuss possible outcomes. And one of the things we need to just say outrightly is, the enforcement of two-third gender rule, because we believe that by doing so, we're going to open doors for inclusion and participation of women in all structures. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Her Excellency Alice Wahome, I think, to take over from here. Oh, Tisa. Okay, all right.
Thank you, and apologies for the slight change in terms of our speaking arrangement. Your Excellency, Your Excellencies in the room and colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here. I'll be very brief because a lot has been said. One is that, Your Excellency, we have... Sorry, yeah, I know, let us settle. We appreciate the additional time that you've given us, and I'll be brief in that regard. We have several proposals around that are very detailed, and we can't exhaust them. We have a brief manifesto. The version we have put on the table is the popularized one. Of course, backing that, we have more comprehensive submissions, but we have a simplified manifesto which stresses on a number of things. And my colleague, Dr. Rugo, has brought it out very well. But I'd really want to stress that Kenya's public debt procurement and management system is broken because we have seen a violation of the public finance management constitutional safeguards to move us from a debt sustainable position, almost a balanced budget position, into the problem we are in. And COVID found us in a very vulnerable position. COVID found us losing competitiveness because since 2015, the country's been losing regional competitiveness. So we are building, very nice infrastructure. But when you look at what we are earning in terms of exchange rate and how our products are doing out there, there is no foundation for the promises that the party is making. So we really need to look at the debt management system comprehensively and overhaul it. And this includes the state-owned enterprises, that restructuring process. We need transparency, accountability there. Looks at the PPPs that are in place and are being touted as the option for revenue raising. But you can see, without the income coming in, there is no tax to pay, even for the PPPs. So, and we really propose this to be a process that brings the political parties, actors together, so that we don't have a situation where a government, whoever is in government, is not working in concert with the other political actors. So I think the urge is, should Kenya Kwanza ascend, should you take that seat, let it be a government that confronts the reality of we're in a poor economic state. And all actors need to work around this because the brunt is being borne by the ordinary Kenyans, more so the low income. So one is that. The second is our assessment of it, and I think it's come out here, is a failure of political accountability. And this is a problem that Kenyans have been grappling with for a long time. It's not new. The 10 years has been worse. We have seen reversals. We have seen corruption reach levels we didn't know. It has become more sophisticated as global trends go. So we are using our good knowledge and expertise to also undermine our governance. This is not sustainable. And the figures here have shown it's not sustainable. So the big agenda is political accountability. And really, it starts with the leadership and the decisions that the leadership makes, and the transparency and the accountability. The third thing I'd like to bring out, it's also come out in one way or the other, and I know Daisy is having a bilateral with you on that, Your Excellency, is civil society. Civil society was a friend of the 2002 administration, the NAC administration. We started a process of developing a public benefits organization framework that would support civil society, that would make civil society accountable and more effective working with government. We know the last 10 years that process was frustrated. We know there's been mistrust, there's been the evil society adage. Civil society contributes employment, expertise. In fact, some of our best colleagues wind up supporting government, and they bring in the values and the expertise that we have. And so we know that we have champions in Kenya Kwanza, and we want more champions. And I know we've worked with Alice Wahome, Honorable Alice Wahome, from a long time ago. So where is civil society? Please make sure civil society are part and parcel of your agenda. The last one is on public participation. This is, we've had very vibrant public participation because of the Constitution, because of devolution. But it remains tokenistic. And it remains tokenistic because of the fear of really empowering citizens, ensuring there is village governance, ensuring resources go to the local level, ensuring there is transparency at the local level. For instance, in Makwiny, they have procurement committees. Contractors can't be paid until citizens have scrutinized the project. They have access to the bills of quantity. That is what empowering public participation is, working together with CBOs to support the local economic development. So we need to change the narrative to one of cooperation, to one that focuses on growing the economy, to one that is bringing solutions on the table and bringing all stakeholders on the table. And I pray that that is the approach that Kenya Kwanza will take as you campaign, and should you then ascend into office, that we can see that kind of governance. So I'll leave it there, and I wish to then invite my colleague, or our colleague, and also your right-hand man, Dr. Sing'oei, karibu. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Dr. William Ruto, honorable members of Parliament, governors, colleagues, my name is Korir Sing'oei. Like Wanjiru says, I came from civil society, and for the last 9 years I've worked with and for the Deputy President of Kenya. It's been a great pleasure, sir. Thank you for entrusting me with that responsibility. I don't really want to say much. I just want to thank Your Excellency for making time for this engagement. Patita and I are sort of the liaison persons with civil society within the Kenya Kwanza platform. We are also liaison persons in relation to a number of other interest groups. And so please do not feel that you're on your own. Do not feel that you're outsiders. You're actually part and parcel of this movement, which His Excellency the Deputy President is creating. And so I know that there are many gallant leaders, gallant women leaders, especially within the Kenya Kwanza formation. And Your Excellency, with your leave, I'm going to request that Honorable Wahome just comes up and takes it up from here. But just before you speak, Honorable Wahome, I want to acknowledge my friend Dr. Wasuna. And if you could just sit for a second, please. Could I just request Dr. Wasuna, who is really a distinguished professor of law, and a colleague in the extractive sector, to just say one or two words in relation to women in extractives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Your Excellency. All protocols observed. Good morning. My name is Melba Wasuna. I'm the chairperson of the Association of Women in Extractives, which is oil, gas, and mining and energy in Kenya. Thank you for this fantastic opportunity. We started being active in 2017 with the passage of a new mining act, because we were very curious as to why this sector, which can do so much for our economy, has been completely muted. And in the last 5 years, we have grown by leaps and bounds. We have chapters in Kwale, Turkana, Taita Taveta is our backbone. And we've got wonderful grassroots women whom we have evolved their mentality from thinking of mining as a poverty-related sector to women in business. And they mean business, Your Excellency. They really do. What we are asking for today, I've been told to keep this brief, so I will. Your Excellency, we want to challenge you. For the longest time, and all manifestos I've read, every person who's speaking is speaking about agriculture. Yes, agriculture is the backbone of our economy, no problem. But so is mining. Your Excellency, what we are asking for is, one, policy changes, where if it is not farmed, it is mined. If it is not farmed, it is mined. Why? Everything that we are putting on today, that is what? Farming. What do we hold in our hands? Phones. Your phones have got over 30 minerals in them. These are God-given natural resources right beneath our soils. So as much as we're talking about debt, recovery, we've got natural resources in this country that can help to address, rather than us going to borrow, all we need is proper policies that can be able to address some of these debt issues that we are facing. We need the commitment. If it's not farmed, it is mined. Tanzania, our neighbor, we've just heard from my colleague, talking about how our countries are coming up. Tanzania has really focused on mining in the last few years. And mining, I think, is 60% of their GDP, and you can see it is a rising giant. It is on the backbone of mining. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just unfortunate that in our history books, we were taught mining is only Magadi soda, and it is not. So for a lot of us, our consciousness, we don't really acknowledge it was Magadi soda and sold somewhere in Kilifi. But I put it to you that as of this day, can I ask a simple question? How many of us have got side hustle somewhere? Okay, that's Kenyans. All of us have a side hustle. Isn't you? Now, do you give 1% to any CSR from your side hustle? And I'm not talking about tithe, just side hustle. Mining, by law, every company must give 1% to CSR activities. Base Titanium in Kwale spends 200 million shillings a year on CSR by law. That's in Kwale County. Can you imagine if we had about 5 of these spread in various parts of the country, and the kind of economic rejuvenation it can provide? So a lot of this, once again, starts from policy, that if it is not farmed, it is mined, so that the two complement each other, and we use our resources to advance us to where we need to be. The second ask we as women would ask for, Your Excellency, is markets. That's also a policy decision. Can you imagine that we've all heard of rubies in Thailand, huh? Cynthia, do you know that over 80% of those rubies are from our mines here? Yes, they are from here. Their brokers come here, buy our stones. Why do they get away from it? We have never, in the history of this country, bothered to label our stones. So they are seen as Thailand rubies. They don't have rubies. We do, right? And it's in various parts of the countries. We've got gemstones, a variety of gemstones. Have we heard of the tsavorite? Tsavorite, yes. Green garnet. Did you know that it is far more valuable than diamonds? But you know of Botswana diamonds, isn't it? But we don't have the Kenyan tsavorite. We know the Tanzanian tanzanite, isn't it? But not the Kenyan tsavorite. All it takes is a policy change at the very top, and it changes the price overnight. Our women right now, and also our men, most of us who mine, we take our stones to Tanzania. What does that do to our revenues as a country? We lose them, right? Because they are counted as Tanzanian stones. Of course, they are going there under handbags and under everything else. But it is because of just lack of policy. So Tanzanians claim this stone as theirs, but they are not. They are Kenyan stones. Once again, for me, it comes down to a question of policy, and we are urging Kenya Kwanza, my colleagues here, if it can please be considered, and if you can adopt the tag phrase. If it's not farmed, thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you. I think if there is something, Your Excellency, that has come out of this meeting, at least for me, is that civil society is a resource. Your Excellency, I really urge you to leverage on civil society. There is so much innovation. There is so much robustness. There is so much knowledge in this sector for any government. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite Honorable Wahome. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This morning meeting is for the civil society and yourself. But I am happy that they were able to reach us out, and I want to thank Gloria for saying that there is a problem in terms of us linking with the civil society. You remember, Your Excellency, you had tasked me to keep on engaging various civil societies. So therefore, I want to thank you very much for this particular morning, for ensuring that you engage His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. Even before you say he's a candidate, he's your Deputy President, and therefore there is even a need that we should have engaged him earlier. I want to recognize Honorable Gladys Shorey. Your Excellency, let me please stand up. Honorable Gladys Shorey, you know her. Member of Parliament for Uasin Gishu County. Then there is Governor Madago. We will not be able to speak because we want His Excellency to address the issues. Yes, karibu sana. Then we have Governor Nanok. Governor Nanok, you know, he introduced himself, but he's a great gentleman there. But allow me to also introduce, yes, I see you. Allow me to introduce the Secretary General of UDA Party, Veronica. You will excuse me, Veronica, I know you are a great woman, but let's just allow only Seth Barida. You can see she has come all the way from Embu. She's our governor candidate. Please come and take only 1 minute. This is a child of the civil society from youth agenda, and therefore working with us. So when civil society, you say you can't reach us, I wonder, you forgot this is your child. This is, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Alice, Your Excellency, the Deputy President and the incoming President of Kenya. Our protocols observed. Good morning. I'm glad to be here and really excited about this engagement with civil society, which is where I came from. And I'm particularly excited about the presentations that have taken place this morning. And I just found myself really missing those old days when I stood in front of leaders and told them what it is we thought we needed to do. But I'm particularly excited, Your Excellency, and now you'll understand us women leaders, myself, Alice, Keheka, when we sat down to do the Women Charter, after having gone around the entire country, and you listened to the views of women across the country. And when we were doing the Women Charter, one topical issue that was on the table was the AJAABU issue. And I'm really excited about the presentation by Akoth, and especially when she said that, you know, about the way it is women are treated, and the fact that we haven't even scratched the surface of AJAABU. And just to let you know that through the Women Charter, the Kenya Kwanza Women Charter, which our presidential candidate has signed to, we have said that AJAABU is going to be implemented both at national level and at county level, and that will ensure that women are trained and that there will be LPO financing of women. But I'm thinking that listening to our sister here, we may need to put more flesh into the whole AJAABU concept and see how we can make sure that it is implemented properly. And I want to assure you, the civil society, that we who will be in the leadership of Kenya Kwanza government will make sure we push that AJAABU becomes a reality, and one that we are not begging, and where we are able to push women-owned businesses to even do bigger bigger projects than they're already doing right now. And I hope that we can continue to work closely together, even beyond the 9th of August, because I'm sure one of the success stories of the Kibaki regime actually was his partnership with civil society. And so it is important that beyond 9th of August, we continue to engage with civil society. But I want to assure you that we will push our agenda, and I, being the next governor for Embu County, God willing, I want to make sure that these things that we are talking about at the national level do actually cascade to the county level. And I will particularly be very keen on the AJAABU program at the county level, so that all governors across the country must really implement the AJAABU program. So thank you very much, Your Excellency, for accepting to sit with these great brains, I can tell you that. And I believe going forward, we will make Kenya even better with our engagements. Thank you so much.
Your Excellency, there is Honorable Soipan. Please stand up. We have agreed we are not speaking. Honorable Soipan has been part of the team that coordinated this meeting. I want to thank her very much, but she's also our convener for the Women Charter, and she's participating in the roaring down of the charter to the regions. So from here, we actually headed to Honorable Barire's county to discuss the charter with women. So and we will want the civil society's input, because I'm sure on the charter, in the charter, there are great issues. Some of the issues that the civil society have alluded to here have actually been captured in the charter. Your Excellency, I know you are standing, but let me assure you, His Excellency is committed to various issues that you have spoken to, Your Excellency, but there is something that I need to say. As a product of the civil society, governments have stigmatized the civil society. They have abandoned the civil society. They have even taken some to courts because they have spoken to questions of accountability and integrity. And I would want to assure the civil society that this government, Kenya Kwanza, will be a different government. Scrutinize our Women Charter, scrutinize our manifesto that I'm sure he will say when we are launching, and then you'll know you have a good friend and a partner within Kenya Kwanza. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The leadership of TISA and all the other civil society groups present here this morning, the Kenya Kwanza fraternity members who are here, and all our friends, good morning. Hamjambo. Let me say, first and foremost, I want to thank the men and women who put this meeting together, both from our political formation and the civil society groups. It is a very important moment for all of us, especially in the space where we are focusing on the elections in August. The conversation that we are having here is a very important conversation that brings together people from different sides of government. We have the politicians, we have others, and then we have our good people from civil society. When I came and saw Daisy, I was laughing, and she was wondering, why are you laughing? And I like Daisy because she speaks her mind. Sometimes you may not like what she has to say, but she says it anyway. Sometimes she has been very unkind to me. I feel like calling her and telling her, Daisy, surely you cannot say this. But I appreciate that she's a very strong person. And in Kenya Kwanza, the women and civil society agenda is alive, and we have many people in our political formation that trace their roots to civil society and women advocacy institutions. Alice here was, I think, a member of FIDA, and many other people. So I can confirm to you that in our political formation, we have what I consider to be the strongest women leaders. I also want to agree with you on 3 items. Allow me just to break it down to 3 items. I want to agree with you that the economy is the center, front and back of this election. And any discussion that is not centralized about the economy is not a honest conversation. I think everything else is secondary. And that is why, as Kenya Kwanza, you have heard us loud and clear that this election is about the economy. And the economy, I agree with my good friend Abraham, that the economy is not in a good place. We cannot deceive ourselves. The economy is not in a good place. And we need to sort it out. Against the background of the debt, the rising debt that we have, against the background of the deficit that continues to expand, and the payments that we have to make that are not discretionary and that have nothing to do with us making progress, but just paying debt and making sure that we are moving. So, as Kenya Kwanza, realizing the importance of the economy, and I associate myself with your sentiment that about Okoa Uchumi. Yeah, it is right. I have heard our worthy competitors say, oh, you know, debt is good, so long as it is other people's money anyway, just use it, you know. If you're going to be spending 1.3 trillion shillings paying debt, and you don't think that is serious, then there is something very wrong somewhere. Why have we centralized the economy in our conversation? And how do we intend to deal with the things Abraham raised here? Number one, we do not think it is prudent to continue borrowing. It is said, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging first so that you can figure out how to get out of it. We must slow down and eventually stop on borrowing, unless it is something that we have calculated about. I dare say that the borrowing spree that we see is actually deliberate. I don't know for what purpose, maybe to achieve a political end or something, but I don't think it is prudent. And therefore, the Kenya Kwanza administration, by God's grace, we will first and foremost figure out how to stop borrowing. Slow down, eventually stop borrowing. That's number one. Number two, how do we fund what we need to fund and the commitments we have made and the promises we are making? We have two options. When you hear us talk about bottom up is not bottom versus up. It is bottom up. We believe that there's a huge category of Kenyans that today have no chance of paying taxes, not because they don't want, but because they are not in a position to pay. How did we arrive at this pool of Kenyans? We inject into the labor market about 800,000, 900,000 people every year. 50,000 get jobs in corporate Kenya. Another 150,000 get jobs in formal SMEs. But 600,000 odd Kenyans join this space, which is basically a lottery, that has no, you don't know exactly what you're doing, but you're doing something. Today you're selling this, tomorrow you're selling the other thing. You're making 100 shillings today, you make 200 shillings tomorrow, you get another 300 shillings the next day. It's a lottery, So we have this pool of 550,000, 600,000, and 600,000 Kenyans who join this lottery every year. And that's the pool that keeps increasing. It's now around 10 million people, hustlers, the people who are doing all manner of jobs, making 100 shillings, 200 shillings. And the biggest challenge that this big body of Kenyans have is, in our assessment, number one, a place to do whatever it is that they are doing. Number two, legislation to protect what they are doing. And number three, which is the biggest animal, is access to credit. The proliferation of Fuliza, for example. Fuliza today lends maybe 1 billion shillings a day. 1 billion shillings a day. Why? Because it's the only available credit. And do you know how much people pay for Fuliza credit? 6% per day. That is 2,000% per year. Tell me how you're going to do anything meaningful on money you pay 2,000% per year. You can do nothing. And that's why we have 15 million people on CRB. Right? So access to credit is a very big issue. Our assessment is that this big body of Kenyans who are doing all manner of jobs, and that's why we pushed this Mama Mboga to the center of our economic debate, is because she represents that category of Kenyans that have no place to do their business. Most of the time they are doing it in the sun. They have no protection. The kanjo is always there, and they have no access to credit. So our experts have worked out, if we just made them access credit, even at the current rates of 14% per year, we can move those people from earning 200 shillings per day to earning between 500 and 700 shillings a day. What will happen if that happens? If you do just 200 shillings per day on top of what they are earning today, you will increase their income by about 2 billion shillings a day. You will have 750 billion shillings a year. So what that happens is that we will have a bigger pool of people who can buy goods, who can buy services, and contribute to taxes, right? So we are widening the tax base. Many people sometimes misunderstand bottom-up to mean it is something against the people up the economic ladder. In fact, bottom-up provides a firmer foundation for those in manufacturing, because you need more people with money in their pockets to be able to buy whatever we are manufacturing, whatever our industries are producing. That's how we are going to increase our tax base, and that's how we are going to have more people paying taxes, and that is how we are going to collect more tax. So our approach is to broaden the tax base by empowering the people at the bottom of the pyramid, and they don't need much. The people at the bottom of the pyramid do not need a lot of money. But when they have it, they will turn it around because of the large numbers we're dealing with. And that is why we have come up with a Hustler Fund. And we have said we are going to learn from what did not work with all the other funds we tried to put together. It must be simple to access this fund. We are working on the mechanics of how it's going to be different from Women Fund, from Youth Fund, and make it much more accessible so that we can be able to drive the economy of the micro and small enterprises, about 10 million Kenyans. That's number one. Number two, and I'm speaking to what Abraham was asking here, so we intend to grow our taxes, and we intend to grow our taxes by putting money where we get a return. Number two, we are going to invest in agricultural productivity. Why agricultural productivity? Because it's what we have. You work with what you have. Our competitors are telling us they will be giving 6,000 shillings for 2 million families, which works out to 140 billion shillings every year. As Kenya Kwanza, we will work with 30 billion, a quarter of what they propose to use. And we will target 2 million households that today are in food deficit with inputs. And we have done the calculations. You just need about between 15 and 18,000 shillings to be able to provide enough inputs for 1 acre. They are currently producing like 3-4 bags. You can take it to between 12 and 15 bags if you give them the farm inputs. They will not only, and these are food deficit households at the moment, they will not only produce enough for them to eat, they will give you a surplus. Right? And our 30 billion will be a revolving fund. Their 140 billion is a sinking fund. It's all different, right? And it's because people don't think through what they say. You know, they don't interrogate what they say. So because the challenge we have is a challenge of food security. We have a problem today. We have a serious problem of high cost of living. And that high cost of living the biggest contribution to the high cost of living in Kenya today is the cost of food. 52, on average, 52, every Kenyan spends 52% of their income on food. That is Kenya National Bureau of Statistics report. If we bring that down to 35, 40, even by just 10 percentage points below, we will do a lot of saving for us to spend in other areas. So we must deal decisively with the challenge of the high cost of living by investing in agriculture. And that is where the space we've targeted. We're going to target 2 million households with fertilizer, seed, and everything else they need to be able to produce. We will not only tackle the challenge of food security on one end, but we will also, on the other end, not just create a surplus, but we will bring the farmers into a space, into a place where here, we all know that, and Abraham, you can go and interrogate, we collect about 52% of collectible VAT, right? 52% of collectible VAT. And we do that because Abraham said, not everybody pays their share of taxes. There are so many people, either because they have the wherewithal, some of us, because we are in positions of power, we can exempt ourselves from paying taxes. We can exempt our friends. We can exempt our businesses. And so not everybody pays. If everybody paid, and we will make sure everybody pays, and we don't have to, it's not rocket science. The reason why we have not automated our whole system, especially on VAT collection. And if you speak to KRA today, there is absolutely no reason why we are collecting 3.6% of our GDP as VAT. Rwanda is collecting 8% of their GDP. South Africa is collecting between 11.5% of their GDP. If we moved our tax collection to where Rwanda is, and Rwanda was where we were 5 years ago, this is not a process that will take years. This is a program we can achieve in 1 year. We can drive our revenues from the 1.8 trillion that we are targeting to collect. We can drive it to 3 trillion. It is possible for us to collect another 500 billion at the moment if we just collected all the VAT that we need to collect. And if you collect all the VAT that you need to collect, it will come along with another maybe 250, 300 billion shillings on corporate tax. So we must focus on how do we grow a bigger cake. I think that's essentially what I'm trying to say. Expand, broaden the base of the people paying taxes, and make sure that everybody who is supposed to pay, pays. That way, we will begin the journey to minimize borrowing. Because we will have additional resources close to 800 billion shillings that we don't have at the moment. I would I'd be happy to have a conversation with Okoa Uchumi and your thoughts. And I would want you to interrogate what I have said and tell me whether it makes sense and whether it adds up, you know, because I want you to hold me to account on what I have said. So that way, we will begin the journey to balance our books, because our numbers must add up. We cannot continue growing the deficit. It is dangerous. Yeah. Number four, we are looking at the big challenge today of unemployment. It's a big elephant. When I go to a rally and you find on a Wednesday or on Tuesday thousands of young people in a rally, it also tells you you have a problem. Because these are people who ordinarily would not want to be in a rally if they had something to do, right? But because they have nothing to do, they have come to the rally. You know, very few have stopped to do what they wanted to do. Majority have come to the rally because they have nothing else to do. So the size of the rally speaks to two things. You know, you can have a very successful rally because there are many people. But it also tells you another thing, that you have a very big crisis of unemployment. And we will continue investment, but we will continue investment in areas that not only gives us a quicker return, but also creates jobs. You can grow the economy and not create jobs, like we have done in the big infrastructure programs that we have engaged in, right? So I want to promise you that Kenya Kwanza will begin to focus on investments in areas that will not only create for us jobs, but it will give us a quicker return on our investment, because it's business. Let me give this example that I have given and people have not taken it very kindly. We invested in a gun manufacturing factory here in Ruiru, 4 billion shillings. And we created 100 jobs. Yeah, it's a good thing. We need guns for our security. But in a country where you have thousands of young people without jobs, priority should be investing in infrastructure that creates jobs, because that's what your problem is. The same 4 billion shillings, if we had invested in informal manufacturing, we would have created 5,000 jobs. Same 4 billion shillings. So the policy choice that you have to make is, do you invest 4 billion shillings to manufacture guns and create 100 jobs, or do you invest it in informal manufacturing and create 5,000 jobs? That's a simple choice we have to make. And I want to tell you, that's what makes the difference between whether we're going to turn around this country or not. We are very clear on what kind of investments, and that is why you have heard us clearly say that value addition, agro-processing, manufacturing is going to be a very big part of the investments we are going to make. And we will begin to slow down on hard infrastructure. Not stop, but, balance between the infrastructure we're investing in currently and what will give us jobs and what will give us money in people's pockets. Let me leave that there because of time. I wish I had more time to explain our plan. Let me just speak about the women issue and AJAABU. I think we have a women's charter which we have signed in, and in that women's charter we intend to make it much more easy. We have said in the Hustler Fund, women-led organizations that have LPOs from AJAABU will be automatic beneficiaries of the Hustler Fund resources, because we see that many women have get these LPOs, but they never get to finance whatever it is that they have. And you've shown us that part of the problem is pending bills. We need to think about that. Part of the challenge, you have said, is sexualization, politicization of that whole space. We will need to sit down with you and look at what interventions will we make so that we clean up that space and make women access those opportunities. And finally, transformational leadership, which you've talked about, and I think transformational leadership also speaks to track record. There is nobody who has arrived from anywhere. All these candidates are people we know, right? Nobody has arrived from anywhere. We know everybody, and we know their track record and their performance record. And so, if we talk about transformational leadership, we can clearly assess everybody's track record on their what they have managed to achieve in whatever positions they have been. I have been I've been a member of parliament for Eldoret North. I can account for my time. I have been Minister for Agriculture. I can account for my space in agriculture. In higher education, I can account. As Deputy President, I can account. Everybody else should be held to account. And then number two, you spoke about a very pertinent issue, and that is corruption and theft of public or misuse of public funds. It is a big animal, and sometimes it is pushed around without clarity of what will happen. Our approach as Kenya Kwanza is that we must not personalize. We must not politicize corruption. We must deal with it from an institutional space so that everybody, including the president, is held to account. Our position is that the fight against corruption hasn't gone very far because it is directed by somebody from somewhere, and he or she determines who is corrupt and who should be followed. If you're not my friend, then you're corrupt. But if you are my family, you are not corrupt. Why haven't we gotten the KEMSA billionaires? Why? Because they are friends and they are family of the people who tell us they are in charge of corruption, of fighting corruption. Right? What we are saying is the following. Why, for example, while the Constitution says the judiciary fund should have 2.5% of our budget, why is the judiciary continuing to get 0.7, 0.8% of our budget? Why hasn't the judiciary fund been operationalized? It is because there are people who want to continue pulling strings around the judiciary. And that is why the judiciary lacks the capacity to deal with matters of accountability and corruption the way it should. Kenya Kwanza will deploy all the resources required by the Constitution and the law. If it is 2.5%, it will be 2.5%. And the judiciary fund will be operationalized so that we give the judiciary the capacity, human, technical, and every other capacity to deal with matters of accountability and matters of justice without reference to anybody. That's number one. We must stop the fight with the judiciary. I have said that it doesn't matter whoever is nominated by the Judicial Service Commission. They don't have to be my friends. I don't have to like them. If they have passed the interview and they are people who have gone through the process, they must be given the chance to serve in those offices. Like, for example, the 6 judges that have not been appointed. Why? I will appoint those judges day one and give everybody a chance to serve in their capacity. Are we together? Number 2, why does the DCI, EACC, and the IG, who is responsible for investigating matters corruption, why do they continue to rely on a budget from the office of the president? Why? The Constitution is very clear. The law is very clear. They need to have an independent budget. They need to have an independent accounting officer so that it doesn't matter who they want to investigate. Even if the president does not like the investigation must go on because they have operational, constitutional, and financial independence. We must take the fight against corruption a notch higher. How does the fight against corruption, for example, take in the president in South Korea? It's because the fight against corruption is run by institutions. If it was run by the president herself, would she have become would the corruption net have found her? Right? So that is where we want to take it. So that it doesn't matter whether it is family, whether it is my friend, whether it is my political ally, or whether it is the president himself. The institutions must be strong enough to deal with everybody. I don't know whether we get that right. That's going to be our, and we want to be held to account to that. Finally, of course you know, corruption thrives around patronage. And patronage is a benefactor of conflict of interest. And the whole of that space takes us to state capture. And that's where we are as a country. We have to deal with state capture. We have to deal with conflict of interest if we have to deal with corruption in Kenya. It just goes that far. Finally, I have made a commitment, a public commitment, and in writing, that we will achieve the 2/3 gender rule. I have made that commitment. Why do I say so with certainty? I say so with certainty because I have great women around me who will work with us to make sure that the mechanism is found for making sure that happens. And I undertook that that mechanism is going to be ready in 3 months. Boss Sholei is here. Yeah, so I have no doubt in my mind that working with the women champions, me being one of them, we will be able to achieve the 2/3 gender rule. I have already made it public that we don't want this to be tokenism. No, it's not about a woman or 10 women in cabinet. It's the whole space of women being at the center of what we are doing because they form 50% of our population. So that commitment you have from me, and it's unequivocal. In fact, those of you who are keen observers, at Bomas, I was the only woman champion. Even the women were shouting at me when I was prosecuting their case. That's how unfortunate it gets sometimes. The people you are fighting for are actually shouting. Because, there was an attempt to relegate women to some space there where they are flower people, and women were busy clapping, and I was telling them, guys, don't you see you're being shortchanged? It's only later that some of them are calling me, but your point was right. We didn't understand it properly, but So when I say I'm a women champion, it is the truth, So so that's where we are. And finally, I don't know whether I have forgotten anything else. The rest of the discussion we will canvass as we move into the future. The extractives, I have heard the good lady who talked about it very well, and I think that is space that women can claim, and we can work together towards achieving the intentions of the country as we do the desires and the aspirations of women in our country. So to all of you, and finally to civil society. I know that we have very strong people who have joined to be policymakers, to be senior people in government from the civil society. I want to promise you that for us to be accountable, because the civil society must keep the space to hold us to account. The same way, the reason why I have a problem, and I have always had a problem with a handshake, is because it created a mongrel of a government. Nobody knew where government stopped and where the opposition started. And once you have that kind of a scenario, you compromise accountability. And once you compromise accountability, you will never have an accountable government. So, I don't want the civil society to be our friends. I want them to be our partners. Yeah? because this friendship brings a relationship that then undermines your clarity on how to hold us to account. The best the civil society can do to us is to hold us to account and to point to us when we are going wrong. They must be able to speak authoritatively that this is not right. And you will bring a lot of value to governance in our country if you hold government to account. The same way I would encourage that Parliament or the legislature should be as independent as it can get so that they can hold government to account, or the executive for that matter, to account. Any government is as good as the accountability mechanisms that are in place. And the two very prominent ones is the legislature and our civil society. I really am looking forward to how we can work with the civil society in a manner that they can be promoted to do what they do best by holding everybody to account. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys as partners. And I want to encourage you. We may be friends, but please do your job. You know, you will assist us greatly if you held us to account. It would be good for you. It would be good for us, and it would be good for governance, the governance of our country. So thank you very much, and God bless you.
Let's give His Excellency another round of applause. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your time. I'm not the one giving a vote of thanks, but I just want to of engagement is open, and that linkage should be there and continued. Your Excellency, it is one of those moments that we know that you have taken time from your busy schedule to come here. The civil society, I don't know who will be giving a vote of thanks, but they would want a photograph with Your Excellency to just for record purposes. Yes. And thank you for making the commitments that you have made. And I'm sure that will go on record. Yeah, I know you mean it. It will go on record. It has gone on record. But let me just tell the civil society. And I think, the civil society voice is either not there, and take me positively, because you occupy a very special place in terms of electoral violence, and you have seen it without mentioning where it is happening. Just last weekend, we had the violence in Jacaranda, and it doesn't matter who does it or who is sponsoring it. I think the voice of the civil society is not audible or is not there. We need to hear it so that then you can continue holding us accountable. I won't add anything else. Maybe I'll just turn it back to either Daisy or whoever is taking. Yeah.
Thank you.